Please give a very warm welcome to Nina Elshof.
Please observe how you respond during this lecture and observe your thoughts and feelings. They might give you a lead to where you need to go from here. You've probably seen this image before, representing the large body of subconscious and unconscious that is part of us and that has a big influence on us. But this also can represent the 93% of information that we receive in an unconscious way. There's only 7 to 10% that we are actually aware about. Now, that's something to think about, yes? One of the great and often unmentioned influences, causes of both happiness and misery in our lives, is our environment. So, the environment that we are surrounded by, the quality of chairs, the walls, everything that is around us. Now, you may think as an audience maybe that you're the smart and clever bunch, otherwise we wouldn't be here, yes? Well, let me ask you a question. And it's a question that has nothing to do with houses, actually. Let me put you in the spotlight for a bit. Who came here by car? Okay. Well, maybe this car is more appropriate. Anyway, you've parked your car somewhere, maybe in the parking lot around the corner, yes? So can you tell me the color of the car that's parked next to yours? You can? Tell me. Blue, good. Who can't? Right. Now, you might say that you don't have a very materialistic view on life and you don't find particular interest in cars. Well, fair enough. So, different question then. Now, without cheating, without looking, the person sitting right behind you, is that a man or a woman? You may look now. Shake hands. Become acquainted. Great. So, yes, we are constantly influenced by our environment without always being aware about that. That can be your home, of course, or the office, for that matter, or maybe a different office, don't know where you work. But it can also be a town hall like this, where we are together. Now, how would this town hall look like if it weren't for the beautiful art banners that Thalia Brown made? Wouldn't it be far more anonymous? How would that have an impact on the way that you receive the information shared during this symposium? So, our environment has a big, huge impact on us. It influences how we feel, what we think, and how we respond. And by doing so, what we are surrounded by can make us feel at ease or on guard. It can trigger generosity, or it can trigger greed or anger. And that's something to think about, especially because we're not always aware of it. So, when you take a look at these pictures, what is it that you feel? What comes up? you feel happy or relaxed? Or does it remind you of one of your holidays you've been on? This is Portugal, by the way. Would you like to live in a house like that? Or go on a holiday to a place like that? And let's avoid the discussion about what is beauty, because that's a very personal thing, isn't it? What beauty is. And any discussion about what beauty really is also a phrase to shut down every discussion. You know, it has the power to silence the discussion that I want to address here. The influence of the environment beyond beauty, beyond what we personally prefer. We can't deny the fact that there is a big influence going on. So, although we might think that we are quite aware of everything, we're nothing more than a bunch of connected individuals operating on a very unconscious level. Now let's take a look at a small video that Alain de Botton made. He's a London-based philosopher who has written a book about the architecture of happiness, which I would recommend to you if you want to not read about Feng Shui, but about, architecture in general. Let's have a look.
Design is the posh word for thinking a lot about how stuff looks. A designed object is one whose makers worked long and hard to get it just right. Most of the world has sadly not been well designed. It's full of office towers, door handles, beds, lamps and plates that have been deeply unloved and were thrown together in a hurry by untalented people. When many people around the world lack the bare necessities, it can be tempting to say that good design can't really matter that much. But we're arguing that it does, desperately so, because of a weird quirk of our psychology. We feel like, and are in a sense, quite different people, depending on what's in front of our eyes. A dark, brooding sky brings out certain feelings, a bright blue one others. This kind of bedroom makes you feel one way, that one another. Design matters because our identities and moods are fluid and shifting, and it's often the quality of the designed environment that determines whether we'll feel confident or defeated, at ease or guarded, generous-spirited or alienated. One of the great debates about how much design should matter took place in the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe between the Catholics and the Protestants. Broadly speaking, the Protestants didn't believe in spending much money on design. They put up simple, functional churches, painted them plain white inside with minimal fuss and bother. Nowadays, many Protestant churches continue to look extraordinarily cheap and basic. The intellectual thought here is that what really matters is certain ideas, and these enter your mind through your understanding, not through your senses. You can get close to God by reading the Bible in a hayloft. You don't need a fancy building. But the Catholics begged to differ. They invested so heavily in design, in stunning stained glass windows, beautiful carved angels, and passionate renditions of the life of Christ, because they fervently believed that our environments do change who we are. We may be further or nearer God depending on what's on the wall and how high the ceiling is. Governments have always understood and respected the underlying idea that design changes us. Nazi designers like Albert Speer paid a huge amount of attention to making sure the designed world would speak of Nazi values like aggression and power. Just as modern German architects have tried to ensure that contemporary Berlin will project an image of democracy, peace and openness. We mould ourselves to the spirit that emanates from the objects around us. We become a little as they are. Even if we're not always able to say quite how objects make us feel, we all sense a spirit, better or worse, that emanates from a given set of objects. We're generally good at playing that game where you try to imagine what sort of person a work of design would turn into if it miraculously became human. When we call an object of design beautiful, what we're really saying is that if it turned into a person, it would be someone we liked, someone maybe dignified or self-possessed, intelligent or adventurous. Beauty is a promise of goodness, and ugliness is evocative of nothing short of despair and evil. And that's why beautiful design matters, because it encourages our better sides, while ugly design stokes our worst ones. We need to make sure the world around us is well designed, not out of some superfluous, expensive taste, but because good design helps us to be the best versions of ourselves.
It helps us to be the best versions of ourselves. Well, when we change our environment, we change our behavior. Study has shown that consumer behavior is often strongly influenced by subtle environmental cues. Many choices are made unconsciously and are strongly affected by the environment. This study is done by Ab Dijkhuis, who happens to be Dutch as well. He holds a PhD in social science. He's a professor at the University of Amsterdam. And yes, of course, this is about, how we shop and how we behave while shopping. And this is done by, to show how the big money makers can make more money out of us going to the store. But anyway, it proves that the behavior of humans is changed by environmental influences. Now, you might not be influenced, but we are. So when we take a larger look at these principles, we come to understand why some cities attract thousands and thousands of people and are liked very much because they are nice and nice design. They function as a background to happy situations, whereas other cities merely function as a background of a crime scene or a social drama. Now, you can only imagine what the effect on humans will have being in a city like this, being overwhelmed by the eco-documents modern architects force upon us. How would the world look like without these eco-documents, without this overwhelming architecture? What does it do to us as humans? It's keeping us down, it's keeping us small, This is so overwhelming architecture that, it doesn't make you happy looking at these buildings. They deprive you of happiness. They show an environment that's not at all human in size. It's an environment we cannot relate to. And they create a sense of loss of identity. We don't know who we are. Are we those buildings? Can we relate to those cube houses, which were built actually in Rotterdam? And when people start to live in here, people used to live in here, once they lived there, all kinds of problems occurred. So nobody's living there anymore. They're just there as a piece of, museum piece. But you still can visit them. But they're very awkward to be in, So our buildings are as extreme as the times they were built in. Where we stand as a culture, as a nation, is represented in the way that we design our public domain. So, this is the old city of Warsaw, and it's very neatly designed. It has, there's a repetition of patterns, there are nice colors used, and it's built in a scale that we can relate to. We can easily imagine going there and sitting on a terrace or going to the market or whatever. But this, however, is what is newly built in Warsaw. You can't ever imagine relating to buildings like that, can you now? These are very overwhelming. They are, in a way, suppressing our identity, suppressing our humanity. Where we are, heavenly influence, heavily, not heavenly, would be nice though, who we can be. Remember the study that Abdagsa did for consumer behavior? We are influenced by our environment. We are not just merely free-floating minds, but we're minds embodied. Now that's an interesting thing to go into deep bit more, because many people, especially here in Glastonbury, are on the spiritual path. They think we don't need bodies anymore, but our body is the biggest part. It receives all these impressions, all this information from the environment. Our senses do, and we respond to that with our subconscious and unconscious levels. So there are people that want to create a very computerized, technocratic, and controlled reality by building buildings like that. Now, who would that be? How would they benefit from it? Again, what would a building feel like if you were standing next to it? So we cannot create a controlled and completely organized life, because life in itself is completely perfect in its imperfection, you know. We move from one mistake to another, from one flaw to another. And that's how we learn. That's how we evolve. Now, this is a quote by Edward Whitman, and he was a famous, I forgot the word. Maybe I'll get back to it later. The mind is an epiphenomenon of the body, and the body is an epiphenomenon of the mind. We operate as body-minds. The body is the visibility of the soul, and the soul is the life of the body. You cannot deal with everything by sheer willpower or mental approaches. We are embodied in a physical cosmos, and we have our bill to pay to physical existence. And that includes our relationship to the physical aspect of the earth. We have to deal with our physical environment. We have to deal with the physical reality we are living in. And yes, of course, it would be very nice to escape from that, but we have to start by accepting the physical reality first. Now, when you look at those buildings that I've showed you before, and the way that they make us feel like small and insignificant, this also works the other way around. You know, we visit cities that have a certain beauty to it because they can put us into an historical context. They remind us of the greatness that we have achieved, well, actually, the English have achieved, in historic times. And you can be proud of that. You can derive confidence from that. You can derive identity from that. They remind you of who you are as a nation. They have an impact on the body. They make you feel great, and they have you open up. Even when you go through the canals in Amsterdam on a romantic boat trip, they can induce the feeling that you might want to kiss. Well, some would. Anyway. So we don't like derelict places either. Why not? Because there's chaos. We can't understand what is going on. We have to be alert. We have to become aware of what is going on. Maybe there are dangers hidden in the corner. So that's why we don't like derelict places. We don't like places that are abandoned. What happened there? What happened to the people that were working there? You know, they give a sense of, maybe horror or something has been going on that wasn't going on very well. Otherwise, they wouldn't have left. So we also don't like places that refer to death and aggression. And why is that, you think? Because those images, those places also, they make us feel afraid. They make us feel small and insignificant again. They make us feel maybe alert and angry. But certainly what they do is they close our hearts. We don't want to feel that anymore. We don't want to project ourselves into that. We don't want to relate to a place like that. We don't want to be there. We don't want to imagine how it would be there for people to be in an actual place like that. Whether that is as a result of an earthquake or a war, doesn't matter. We don't want to be there, so we shut it. We shut our hearts. We stop feeling. It's too big to handle. If we relate to places like this, then the first question that comes to mind is, what can we do about it? What should we do about it? It's too big to handle. We don't know what to do. Those places create an awkward feeling. We want to leave as quickly as possible. Now, the wounds of the world are actually our wounds. They scare the hell out of us because they are so big, too big to handle them individually. So, however, when you start seeing those wounds as truly reflecting your own, that is when change can come about. That is when we can find a way out of the trouble. So remember the derelict places, the places that are abandoned. Your heart is shut down. We distance ourselves from those places. But those are the wounds of the world. That is what is going on right now out there. It's chaos. We know that. It's completely chaos, and there's a lot of grief and sadness going on. And as long as we don't accept that to be a wound that reflects our own wounds, that is how long it will continue going on. Now, something else, what we like is, we like nature. Yes, it makes us feel relaxed and at ease. And we like purity. A sense of purity. It makes us feel in awe. I'm in the way. And also we like culture, again, because it reminds us of our roots, our historic roots of who we are. And we also like colors, of course, and we like crystals. And cookies, of course. Now, there's also other things that we like. We like order. And we like repetition. And also we like things that make us smile. Why is that, you think? Because it opens our hearts. It makes us feel happy. Those images brighten our lives. And when we smile, when our heart is opened up, then we act differently. This is one of the influences from the environment that we can use to create a better feeling for ourselves. It changes how we are, who we are, what we do, what we think, what we feel, and especially how we respond to one another. With an open heart, we encounter people in a different way than when we are afraid or angry or, hiding in our little corner because we don't trust the world. Now, there's not so much we can do directly in the outer world. We can't overnight change the way that the building process and process of planning and design and architecture is forgot a word. Sorry, being Dutch, it happens. Anyway, we can't change that process overnight. But what we can do is take a closer look at the environment that we have directly an influence on. That is our inner world of our home. Let's take a look at our home. It's ourselves that we often want to escape from. And we do that so by escaping from our homes. And why that is because we are the architects of our own houses. And again, we can't change the process of the outer world, but we can change the processes of the inner world, our own home, and what we have created over there. We are creators. As many New Age books want to make us believe, we are creators. We do so on an every daily basis. Every time we get up out of bed, we are the ones that decide to make the bed or not, to leave it as it is. We are the ones that decide to leave the dishes or to do them. We create our environment moment by moment and all the choices that we make. But there you go, we make them probably unconsciously. We don't fully are aware of the impact that an environment has on us. So, in our own home, we have created actually already an augmented reality. So, it's a reality that's real with physical objects like chairs and couches and beds and whatever you've got in your house. But also what we project into them, the emotions we attach to clocks and chairs and beds and paintings and whatever. We see things that aren't actually there. If you would ask your neighbor to say something about the chair that you're sitting in, they would say, well, it's a bit old, it's red, well, it looks a bit shabby, But for you, that same red chair is the one that your granny used to sit in and, used to read her books to you. And so you have an emotional attachment created to that chair. You have created actually a virtual reality around that chair. So let's take a look at grandfather's clock. It's a reminder of your identity because it was handed down to you from your grandfather to your father or mother maybe, and then to you. And it's actually also a reminder of the persona you've created, the way you have designed your house as a reflection of who you are. It's a symbol, a reminder of emotional patterns. That clock represents a whole field of emotions and memories, thought patterns and dogmata, which hold your heart imprisoned in a dark labyrinth of emotional mess. We all have that, more or less, depending on the amount of stuff you have lying around in your house, actually. And not just stuff, but the stuff that has emotional attachment to it. Psychopathology ensues when the challenges of these patterns, these emotional patterns represented by, for instance, grandfather's clock, are not adequately met with awareness, they may threaten to overwhelm us. That's what happens when people create environments in their houses that is filled with stuff, too much, layer after layer, because the patterns aren't adequately met. They keep demanding our attention. So, why are you so attached to certain objects that are in your home? Ask yourself. What does, for instance, grandfather's clock or your equivalent represents to you? How do you derive your identity from it? Which patterns do these objects hold? Which emotional patterns? These emotional patterns that create this emotional web around your heart so that it can not be open as much as it should be. We bring things to life by our sheer projecting emotions into things. And once projected, we forget about these emotions. We tend to ignore them, live around them. But they start transmitting their own information. And it is done at a frequency that can only be received by the creator, which is you. They keep demanding attention. So this augmented reality you've created in your home consists of a whole bunch of items and objects. They don't just stand or hang around there for nothing. They all have a story to tell, be that a thriller or a fairy tale. We like to remember the fairy tale. We like to remember the good memories. We like to ignore the thrillers and the bad memories, but they are still there too. They want to be heard. They come to life in your inner world. They demand your attention. They keep demanding your attention until you recognize and acknowledge which information they have to offer to you. Research has shown that traumatic emotions and the results of stressful events are passed on to next generations through DNA. This is research done on mice, but I can imagine that it happens to humans too. There are stories about children of World War II survivors that show exactly the same anxieties and fears as their parents do. For instance, about starvation or being imprisoned. So all these emotional and stressful events that happen that are, embodied, there we go again, it's about the embodiment, that are passed on through our DNA, as long as they are not addressed, they are an emotional time bomb. Let's go on with that. It's not so interesting. Mice that were inflicted with pain while smelling the scent of cherry blossom combined one with the other, and this information was passed on to the next generation. So the next generation showed tremendous amounts of fear and anxiety and stress when smelling the scent of cherry blossom. And Dr. Brian Diaz of Emory University, who performed this study, says, from a translational perspective, our results allow us to appreciate how the experience of a parent markedly influences both structure and function in the nervous system of subsequent generations. Think of that. If we don't solve our emotional problems, we pass them on to our children, to the next generation. We can start creating a better world now by solving our problems and not passing them on. Now, images, objects hold emotions, memories. There are also, when you look at this, it might be something that is anonymous. You might not recognize this from a personal experience, but still, this can remind us of something. And that is why people tend to buy, for instance, antiques or other special knickknacks. There's going to be a Brocanti market tomorrow here in the High Street with lots of stuff like this. But beware, because these are also objects that hold emotions, maybe not yours, but others, from other people. It's nothing wrong with buying or having antiques in your house, but be aware of the message, the subliminal message, actually, that is attached to them. Liberate yourself from them. Children find it quite normal that their toys come to life, that they have a life of their own. They let them fight and, even have love affairs. They project life into their objects, dead objects actually. And they find it quite normal. But, the thing is, we are all like children. I'm not. Well, he's not, but we are all like children. We too have a collection of toys that come to life in our inner world, although we don't like to think of ourselves as being childish or being children. And that is where we need to grow up. Because, when we go on a holiday, we take knickknacks, bring knickknacks just to, hold the memory of this nice holiday for us. We bring funny wine bottles from Italy or ashtrays from Tenerife. And maybe stone figures from Switzerland. I wanted to show that. Oh, it's up. Oh, do it again. There they are. I like them. Anyway, we all have those things lying around in the house as a memory of a time appreciated. These are good memories, and you can imagine the objects that hold memories that are not so good. So we need to grow up, not by ignoring our naivety, but by embracing the possibility of growth, that we are beginners in our use of manifesting powers as the creators that we are. We are on our way of becoming experts in creating our own environment, and just have to practice a little bit more. Somebody has to show us the way to do it. We have to acknowledge the fact that we are creators. We are, after all, capable of bringing obvious dead objects to life with our emotions. We are, however, still apprentices in this field, and we need to practice and learn from our mistakes. And we need crisis to grow, because we're a lazy bunch that loves to stick to what works. Yes? Well, he's not, but we all are, in a way. We don't want to change, actually, because, that demands of us that we need to do something. We have to come into action. We have to confront ourselves with what we have created. What is it that is lying around in your house? You have to pick up every object and decide whether you want to hold on to it or not. And that is not so easy, as I say it here on this stage. You might have a very awkward sweater lying around in your closet that is itchy, and you don't like the color, it's actually too big, but it's knitted by your sister, and she passed away 3 years ago. You can't ever think of getting rid of that sweater, now can you? The question is, why is it necessarily for you to hold on to that sweater? What is unsolved in your relationship with your sister? Which emotions are there still that are clouding your heart, that are closing your heart? Maybe you don't want to feel the pain and the grief of her departure. That's what happens when you open up your heart. These emotions need to be felt. They need to be recognized, acknowledged. Psychologically, growth of personality occurs through crisis and confrontation, with archetypal, namely specifically typical human patterns, situations, or problems. We create those awkward situations in our house, those objects, over and over and over again. We keep repeating them in order to get the message. Yeah, back to the clock again. It's an issue. Because we are all damaged goods. Let's heal by looking closely at your personal equivalent of my grandfather's clock. Now, my grandfather, he was a lovely man. I loved him very much. He was very dear to me. But he belittled my father in a very nasty way. Now, I love my father dearly too. He passed away many years ago. And he raised me to the best of his abilities, of course. And he used the tools that were available to him at that time, of course. He never ever meant to harm me in a conscious way, yet he did. I was raised and belittled like he was, and I have long thought that I was never going to be good enough. We all have our issues with our parents. We are all damaged goods. Now, this clock, this grandfather's clock, he passed it on to my father, to my dad. And with it came not only the good emotions of having, received something from your dad, finally, but also, the stressful patterns that were part of that relationship. And when my father passed this clock down to me, handed it down to me, I've been sitting staring at that clock for a long time, like, oh my God, I have to do something about this. Do I want to put it up on the wall as a reminder of my father and my grandfather? Or do I want to leave it lying around in the corner because, I don't want to be reminded of, to be belittled anymore, That's the question. And once you resolve the problem, then you release the tension. And once the tension is released, your heart is more free and more open. It's time to evolve. That's why we're troubled. You know why our institutions are failing us, don't you? The church, the state, everything's failing. It's because they're no longer relevant. We're supposed to keep evolving. Evolution did not end with us growing opposable thumbs. You did know that, did you? Yes? Our environment has a huge impact on us. It influences how we feel, what we think, and how we respond. It can have a hold on our heart. Every step you take to clean up your personal emotional mess will disentangle the constricting dark web that surrounds your heart. Every clock, every chair, every painting or mug that is liberated from its function as emotional anchor turns it back to being just a clock, a chair, a painting, or a mug, which you can enjoy without any strings attached. Every release of any tension in your house will create a much safer place for your heart to open up. And every place that is safe enough for your heart to live in will be a home for your soul. Conscious confrontation, deliberate working through with full emotional and bodily experiencing, protect us from the compulsion of destructive acting out and leads us to a new balance between ego and drives. Now, this is not about inventing a new version of yourself. It's about revealing your authentic self. It's about establishing a strong sense of identity without strings attached. You don't achieve that by escaping out of your heart or home, for that matter, but by working through your own creations. Let's sum this up. We are highly influenced by our environment. We're not aware about this all the time, especially when suppressed emotions that live in our inner world are at play. These keep demanding our attention until they are recognized, acknowledged, and released. That is the best solution from preventing projecting them in the outer world. Cleaning up your own interior mess is a way of cleaning up the mess in the outer world. Let's flip the iceberg. Can you turn up the music? Okay. Let's become aware of what is in our subconscious minds, what is hidden in the dark emotional web around our hearts. Let's make that visible. Let's create a different earth by creating a different, cleaner, healthier environment in our own places where we live. Now, I want to thank you for your attention, and I do hope that you've enjoyed the talk and you can take something home with you and do something about creating a better world for us all. Start cleaning up your mess. Start creating a wonderful, beneficial and spiritual home for your soul to live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina Elshof. Thank you.